So let's talk about Dracula Untold from 2014, which was the original start of the new Universal Monster movies, where you had the Universal Monster movie series from, I'd say, 1930s to the 1950s, late 40s, early 50s. I honestly can't remember whenever it ended, but I remember that they started it in the 30s with the Invisible Man, Wolfman, the Mummy, Creature from the Black Lagoon, so on and so forth, Phantom of the Opera. So it's an interesting idea that they would go and reboot these films, but for a modern take on them. I feel like because the Universal Monster movies, the original ones, I've seen most of them. I've seen like the main six that I mentioned. I think I mentioned all of them or most of them, but I've seen all of those, and they're interesting in their own right from whenever they were created and made, and a lot of them are considered classics like Frankenstein or Bride of Frankenstein. There are a lot of these movies that are considered landmarks, like just by starting horror, and I think that it's not undoable that you could make a new franchise out of this with Universal bringing back their monsters. You can do this, and I thought watching this movie, I was like, okay, individuality from like the original films, that's fine because this is an origin story to Dracula. And Dracula's played by Luke Evans, which is interesting because I think Luke Evans is a good actor. I think he is, and I do like his performances in some stuff I've seen. This movie is just one of those movies where I really didn't feel that good about watching this movie. I really didn't enjoy it. And again, it's interesting that they tried to do something different because this is an origin story about Dracula, but this movie is basically just an action movie as opposed to being a horror movie. It really is one of those movies where, unfortunately, it's got a really, really bland script, in my opinion, where I just did not care. And I had friends that told me that they liked this movie, and I'm glad for them if they did, but I just, man, I couldn't get into it. And I feel bad. I always feel bad whenever I don't love a movie that people love or like. It's unfortunate, but the way this movie works is that it's a really, really bland script where Dracula, it is an origin story for Dracula, and he goes and he is he has to fight this other country or a group of people, and he has to fight the other people who are bad guys, and Dracula becomes a vampire by going to evil Charles Dance and becomes a vampire. And he's got a love interest that's really, really boring, and he's got kids that are really, really boring. So whenever you get the idea of caring for these characters, you don't, at least I did not care for these characters at all. And I thought the story was so bland. And I like individuality, but I wish that the movie was interesting. Like, I just was never interested or invested at all. Like, I never one split second in this movie thought that I cared about anybody. Like, it's unfortunate, and it's so weird because again, Universal keeps doing this where like they had this reboot, they had the Wolfman reboot from 2010 with like Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins in it, and can't remember if I liked that one more than this. I didn't like this one, but I feel like I might have liked the Wolfman like a tad more, just a tad, not even a lot. Like, I really didn't think that was great either. And then they made the Mummy with Tom Cruise, and I know that they were trying to crib on the Brendan Fraser Mummy being an action adventure horror movie, but the 2017 Mummy was just such a mishmash of genres that it just didn't work for a lot of people, including myself. So Universal has done this like three times in the past decade where they're just like, we're gonna redo these movies, but we're gonna make them more catering towards the audience and not make them the movie that we should. Like, instance, The Mummy, where like that movie had like build up to all these like connections, like a shared universe, where whenever Avengers came out and every studio wanted to make their own cinematic universe, which I'm glad that's dying down now because it really got annoying because like you had that, you had like Amazing Spider-Man 2, which like brought in every character from every Spider-Man, like, to be introduced in future sequels, and then it's rebooted. Stuff like that. Like, there were so many studios that wanted to go, I'm going to make this universe my own and make it like a cinematic universe, and we're going to make billions of money like Marvel did. Except the problem with other studios, as opposed to Marvel, they just can't do it right for some reason. And this is the case, where it's just like The Mummy tried to do that. This movie tried to do that. At the end of the movie, this isn't a spoiler, but at the end of the movie, it's like, it has stuff that makes you go, oh, there's going to be another one. And then there hasn't been another one. And they rebooted it with The Mummy. And then The Mummy tanked, and they're done with that. And then they rebooted it with an actual good reboot, which The Invisible Man, with starring Elizabeth Moss, which was really, really fantastic. And they actually finally got their groove. They finally understood, like, we're going to make a movie that isn't just going to be trying to be a money guzzler. We're going to try to make this movie good. And I feel like they succeeded with the Invisible Man reboot from this year. But this movie right here, just, it's so utterly boring. Like, I would have not been as annoyed if, like, it was like building up to another universe thing and didn't have a sequel. But it just, the biggest thing for me is this movie is just so utterly uninteresting. There's no shot, there's no character performance, there's nothing that makes me remember this movie. Honestly, I'm forgetting it the more I'm talking about it, because it's just so utterly generic and bland. The only thing I can remember that I did enjoy, and this is just a small little moment that's a visual moment, which I thought was cool for what they were going for, where, like, Dracula in this movie, when after he becomes Dracula, he whenever he becomes a vampire bat, he becomes a million of them. He just becomes a million vampire bats flying around in the sky. He's not one, he's just a million of them flying around. And I think that idea in concept is really cool, but it just falls under the category of, it's a cool visual moment, a cool couple seconds in this, I think, an hour and 45-minute movie, from what I remember. I don't remember it all. Because, again, this movie was just so utterly forgettable. There was nothing, and I don't know what I'm missing. Maybe people, just tell me down below if you guys like this movie, because I can't find anything to like about it, honestly. Besides that one little visual thing I thought was cool. But besides that, there's nothing in the movie that made me remember it. There's nothing that'll make me ever remember it. Maybe if I try to watch it again, but it's going to be a while if I try to watch it again, because, man, I could not be any less invested watching this movie. It fell into every generic category, but with Dracula. But it's an action movie, and again, I do like they're trying to be different, but it just doesn't work. Unfortunately, it's sad. It's like they're trying to be like something that, again, is a shared universe. This movie wasn't as bad as The Mummy was, The Mummy 2017. This one just had that stinger at the end, but this movie still just falls into the category of, it's really just utterly pretty worthless to me, honestly, and it's so bad to say, but I couldn't. The script did nothing for the actors. It did nothing for the movie. The movie just looks bland and not interesting, and it's a shame. It's just so forgettable. But man, I hate whenever I'm negative. But man, yeah, I just thought this was so boring and forgettable. So that's my thoughts on Dracula Untold. Tell me down below if you guys love the movie. I want to see people say they love this movie. I really do, because there are people who do. I've had friends who say they like this movie. So tell me down below if you love this movie or if you don't like this movie, whatever. But I like to see more people like something I don't like. I think that's cooler. But that's it for this video, and thanks for watching. Hey guys, if you like this video, consider checking out my other content. I review a majority of films that are pretty recent, and also older films, and mostly horror as well. Horror is my favorite genre, so I expect a lot of horror. And check out all my links down below. I have a link to Patreon. I have a link to Instagram, link to Twitter, link to my Facebook group, Horror Enthusiast 101, and to my own personal Facebook page, CDR Movie Reviews. And thank you for anybody who watched this video. Thanks for watching.